When I look at a story like Cain and Abel, I think, well, the question, did that happen, begs the question, what do you mean by happen? Because when you are dealing with fundamental realities and you pose a question, you have to understand that the reality of the concepts of your question, when you're digging that deep, are just as questionable as what you're questioning.
Right. That's Jordan Peterson serving up one big old dish of word salad. And look, I wanted to give him a fair shot to make an argument here, right? Because that video, it's floating around the interwebs. People are talking about it. People are saying Jordan Peterson using a lot of words, but isn't saying much. So I listened to the podcast that he was on, and it is the most insufferable conversation imaginable. Like, it doesn't really get much better. So I'll make my case in just a moment, but Cenk, first an opportunity for you to react.
Yeah, I felt like Bill Maher talking to Dave Rubin when Rubin says, no, I'm a really good comic. And Maher goes, right, okay. So I hear Jordan Peterson with like, and then you have to debate, and then did you ever notice the hands too? He's like got this weird thing he does with his hands. But guys, I bothered to break it down. I like Anna, I actually watched a little bit longer clip, and he seems to be debating, discussing with someone who's Muslim. And the guy says, well, wait a minute, earlier in the conversation, when you were arguing for a certain position, you said it was a fact and period, and it didn't need to be discussed anymore, and it was clear. Now when I ask you a hard question, all of a sudden you're like, what do words mean?
No, you're totally right. And that's why the conversation was kind of unbearable. And I just couldn't listen to any more of it after getting halfway through it. And so that's actually a clip from Peterson's YouTube page. He uploaded it yesterday, and it's titled "Talking to Muslims About Christ," which could be a really fascinating conversation. And to be sure, I thought that in terms of what I was able to get through and listen to, the semi-debate about Western colonialism was really interesting. Well, I wouldn't say really interesting. It was the most bearable part of the conversation. The part of the conversation that at least captured my attention a little bit. The video is in part a response to a video Peterson released 3 months ago titled "Message to Muslims," in which Peterson gave this genius piece of advice without acknowledging any nuance or socio-political context. And so let's take a quick look at that.
It is time for those of you in the Muslim world to stop fighting among yourselves, you Shiites and Sunnis. And also time to stop regarding the Christians, and even more specifically, the Jews, as your enemies.
Again, I'm gonna give you a chance to weigh in here, Cenk. Go ahead.
Revolutionary thoughts. No one thought of that before. Oh, what if the Shiites and the Sunnis stop fighting?
What if?
Genius, dude. And what if they like the Christians and the Jews? By the way, what if already a lot of them like Christians and Jews, which they do? But he just assumes like all Muslims bad, hate all Christians and Jews. And by the way, do Shiite and Sunni fight? Of course they do, right? But does every Shiite hate every Sunni? Does every Sunni hate every Shiite? No, it usually happens in situations where there's an artificial conflict imposed upon them, which then leads to anarchy, which then leads to sectarianism and leads to Shiites and Sunnis fighting, kind of like the Iraq war that the right wing was in favor of and turned into a disaster. But I love what they talk about in regards to religion. I can't wait to break that down, including pictures. So
one, I guess, piece of credit, because the tone that Jordan Peterson had in this video was different from what I've personally experienced with his content. He seemed to be a little more gracious. Usually he just kind of rejects an opponent's perspective or data, evidence, whatever it is. And he just kind of like digs his heels in more. But in this case, he seemed to be a little more gracious. And Peterson also said that he had approached that whole video, talking to Muslims about Christ, poorly. So he conceded that he handled that poorly. And I do want to give him a little bit of credit for that, right? If someone has the ability to admit like, I didn't do that right, I kind of regret it. Credit where credit is due. Now, with that said, more word salad. Let's watch.
Do you believe in God? And I think, okay, there's a couple of mysteries in that question. What do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean believe? And what do you mean God? And you say as the questioner, well, we already know what all those things mean, except belief in God. And I think, no, if we're going to get down to the fundamental brass tacks, we don't really know what any of those things mean.
Right. Yeah. What do you mean do? I'm just gonna clip that out and send it to you, Cenk, every time you give me some work-related task. What do you mean do?
No, but again, what the Muslim dude said is really important here, because before he's being super clear and harsh about his positions. But when you corner him on a position that doesn't make sense, he's like, what do you mean do? What do you mean you? What do you mean boo? Do you mean on a boat or do you mean on a goat? Okay. So, but yeah, again, Anna, because I'm fascinated by this. The reason I'm fascinated by it is that right wing held him up as an intellectual, and I hadn't heard him for a long, long time. They kept saying intellectual. So when I finally started watching some videos, I was like, oh my God, this is who they think is an intellectual. Oh, that's embarrassing. Oh, that's super embarrassing. So again, I always want to give him a fair shot. So I listened to that whole section, and I'm like, look, brother, if you're talking about belief in God, saying, hey, what do you mean by God is a perfectly fair question. What do you mean by belief, etc. You can even have an interesting philosophical conversation about what do you mean by you? What is it, what is identity? What does it mean to consider yourself I, right? But that's tangential to the conversation you're having. That's a completely different philosophical discussion, right? When you bring that into this discussion, that means you don't know what the hell you're talking about. You're stalling and totally lost. So within this context, what do you mean by do, or what do you mean by you is the equivalent of saying.
Yeah, look, I don't know what Jordan Peterson's genuine motivations are, right? Like there have been instances in the past where it seems like he's just a mouthpiece for the right wing and there's like a grifting element to it. But you got to really think through what you're saying, especially if you're going to go on speaking tours, especially if you're going to agree to debates. Like he did a debate with someone named Slavoj Žižek, and it was on the topic of Marxism, and it was brutal. It was really brutal for Jordan Peterson, absolutely brutal.
Because these guys have no idea what they're talking about, Anna. They're just amateur hacks. And the minute they use SAT words, that the right wing goes, oh, intellectual, telling me something I want to hear. I want to hear that all Muslims should be Christians.
Look, it's not just right wingers though. Like I personally know of, and people I work with personally know of, people within our social circle who kind of got sucked in by Jordan Peterson. And this is the thing, Jordan Peterson does a really good job filling a void that I think the left needs to consider a little more and think about a little more clearly, because there are a lot of young boys and men who feel isolated, depressed, neglected, all of that stuff, right? And Jordan Peterson comes in and he offers a solution. He sucks people in with that.
Yeah, but Anna, I don't find that interesting. I think that's a very classic right-wing trick. Find a problem like, oh, corporate media is lying to you. The politicians are not honest. They're not honorable gentlemen having a debate. They're just getting paid by their donors. They find a thing that's true, right? And then they misdirect you, right? And that's why you should be in favor of Donald Trump, who's the most corrupt person in American political history. Wait, how do we get there? And that's why Bill Gates and Dr. Fauci are doing something to your COVID vaccine. What? Well, how do we get here? You have a correct problem and then you had an absurd answer to it for political reasons. In his case, yes, there's a lot of guys who are young and lonely. There's some stunning stat I saw the other day that they're having 3 times less sex now, I think, for men under 30, something along those lines. It's just, I'm doing it off the top of my head. So there is a real problem there, but then he misdirects them into lunacy. And being against women and the absurd ideas about forced monogamy, and he just so that misdirection is unproductive and oftentimes loathsome.
Yeah, no, I look, I 100% agree with you on that. But the reason why I bring that up is because it's not just right wingers who get sucked into that pipeline, right? It's men who don't necessarily identify as right wing or conservative, who might also feel lonely, atomized, all of that stuff, aimless. And since I think that there is a little bit of a problem with, broadly speaking, I'm not saying leftist, but broadly speaking, the left thinking like the boys are all right, the boys are okay.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's good. And look, I want to differentiate the argument that I'm making from what I've seen online a little bit, because no one is entitled to sex. So if men aren't having sex and the number of men who are like virgins under the age of 30 has increased dramatically, like my solution isn't, hey ladies, time to have more sex with the guys. No, that is not what I'm saying at all. But there's a deeper issue here, and people like Jordan Peterson, and to some extent, even more nefarious figures like that Andrew Tate guy, come in and they fill that void. And it's a pipeline to the right. And I think that we need to think a little more strategically about it, not just for politics, but also because I care about people. I don't want people to feel lonely and isolated.
Yeah, Anna, so the left does make this mistake often. So they pretend that there is no problem. You don't have to pretend that. There's no reason to pretend that. You should have a constructive solution to the problem. So we've gone through this with crime. Oh, there is no crime. No, that's just, you could say there's no spoon all day long, but there's a spoon, right? And so we're all getting disconnected. It's not just about young men and how they're disaffected because they're disconnected. It's kind of thing Jordan Peterson might say. Anyway, but it's in our entire communities. We're no longer connected through our neighborhoods, our churches, etc. And that feeling of being disconnected is real, and it's a big problem. And if the left says it's not real, that's not at all helpful, right? But this gobbledygook that the right does is not only not helpful, it's trying to push you oftentimes in a very evil direction. Now, in this case, for Peterson, you're right. The jury's out on whether he's just a knucklehead or if he's a guy with a really bad intent. But so finally, let me just really quickly show you a couple of the pictures from his book to give you a sense of why he might not be a bad guy. This is the most ironic defense, right? Because this is kooky stuff. I analyzed this testicle picture, and none of it makes any sense. It's almost like that last scene in Beautiful Mind when you see the chalkboard and he's been just drawing nonsense, right? Look, I'm atheist at this point in my life. So, and I was religious, so I don't want to be too harsh to religious folks, but this is all based on the invisible man in the sky. And the invisible man in the sky thinks that you are anomalous information and you descend into disintegration because you have gone past the walled garden and have the unconscious paradisal world. That's all stuff in Jordan Peterson's head. None of that is remotely true.
No, I think I just figured life out. That was amazing. Thank you for sharing that with us, Cenk.
Yeah, I mean, everything he says is just weird assumptions. And made up things like the pre-cosmogonic egg. Okay, it just sounds fancy. So people go, oh, the pre-cosmogonic egg. That must be a thing. It's not a thing, okay? And so last one, show the second picture here. So he has a hero on the upper right corner, and he says, what should be the ideal future? Okay, maybe that's fair. What is the unbearable present? Why? Why are you assuming that?
What?
Why is the present unbearable?
Unbearable?
Yeah, No, apparently the president is unbearable for you. You're having a lot of psychological and mental health issues or whatever you're having. That's why you're constantly crying on air nonstop, right? And then you're projecting that onto the world and calling it a philosophy. It ain't. It's just your personal troubles that you drew a diagram of.
Sometimes it's not about reaching the goals. Sometimes it's about the journey. You got to enjoy the journey.
Okay, I
should write a book.
Yeah, Jordan, draw some more testicles and then go to a therapist. Okay, get some help. Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.